and welcome to yet another episode of Common Mistakes, where we talk about mistakes we've made, we've seen, we've experienced, so you don't have to learn the hard way. I'm Laura Meyer.
And I'm Todd Pachowski. Today we have the absolute pleasure of having Destaney Wishon on the show. She is the co-founder and CEO of BetterAMS. Her career in Amazon began about 6 years ago when she got to start managing AMS campaigns for some of the most well-known brands on the platform. Since then, she's personally managed ads for over 30 Amazon brands, and her team at BetterAMS currently manages over $75 million a year in advertising spend across search and display. A side note, if you're looking to connect with her, she puts out amazing LinkedIn content, so definitely check that out. Destaney, thanks for hopping on the show. It's great to have you.
Super excited to be here on a Friday before Prime Day.
Exactly.
The calm before the storm, for sure.
Exactly.
As you know, I like to kick it off with our normal first question of tell us about a time that you made a mistake that maybe in the moment it felt awful, but today you are so thankful for that experience because you just learned so much from it.
Can I get a little philosophical here on what my mistake is? Okay.
Please.
So when I got started in this industry, I was working at a really quick growing Amazon startup based out of Bentonville. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It's really been the catalyst that's got me to where I am today. It introduced me into the amazing community and everything that comes with Amazon. But I made the mistake of just not having the confidence in myself and realizing that I had control over every aspect of my life and my future. And I stayed with this incredibly toxic agency because the shiny object of Amazon and my insecurity of my worth. And I think that's something that I see a lot in this space because we're all growing so quickly. We're all learning as we go. Amazon's fun and exciting, but your mental health has to come first. And I stayed way too long. It was a mistake that taught me a lot of lessons later on. I've now realized that, hey, when I build a team, how I build a culture, this is what matters. And I've started to prioritize my mental health all because of that. But I think the biggest thing is realizing you have direct control and power over your personal happiness and life. And that can be hard to see.
I love that you brought up this topic because I can even say in my early days of starting my agency and coming from the New York hustle culture, you absolutely burn out if you're not careful. And e-commerce, whether it's Amazon or even your own website, it never sleeps. And it's so easy to get consumed in it. And I'll say from a similar experience, I feel like when I kind of deflated the stress bubble, shall we call it, business actually performed better. And I'd be curious to dig in a little bit deeper. So what boundaries have you set personally, but also within your own business to better protect your culture and your team members?
I would say there's a few things that really stand out. One, I think that a lot of burnout comes from a lack of self-awareness because it's really hard to just when you're surrounding yourself with high performers, like we all are, you compare yourself to those high performers. And even as the person who really doesn't have anyone else coming down and micromanaging everything I do, I micromanage my own time. So I had to start realizing when I'm starting to hit burnout, I need to step away because my output is not going to be near as good. And if I continue to just push, even though I'm nearing burnout, it gets to the point where I want to walk away from the business. So when I kind of start hitting that point of just more frustration, more stress, I truly will turn everything down, walk away and spend some time disconnecting. And then I will come back, 10x. And that's what I've had to talk to the team a lot is no one knows, it's easy to say, hey, work-life balance, work-life integration, don't overdo it. But that's so dependent on who you are as a person. Because if you have kids or if you have other things going on in your life, they're going to directly affect your work. So it's not as easy as black or white, take 30 days off a year. It's truly finding that balance for who you are. So I think the self-awareness journey is probably the biggest lesson that I've tried to really help with people. And then just trusting them to make the decisions that are in their best interest.
Yeah, 100%. And some people are like myself and others on our team, just, overachievers who, if you don't give yourself that time or someone doesn't give you that guidance to tell you to slow down, you just keep going at it. And that can be harmful and cause burnout for yourself for sure. I love that topic and I would love to stay on this, but I think we have some Amazon ad stuff to discuss. And I would like to start with a question just around ad types. So talking about advertising on Amazon, there's a lot of new ad types that keep rolling out. You've got sponsored products, sponsored brand, display, new options within display. What ad types should brands absolutely be using? Let's say, just to caveat, add something to this, let's say they're strapped for budget. Should brands be using all ad types, or would it make sense perhaps just to focus on, let's say, sponsored products, given the fact conversion and ACoS is generally a little bit better?
Yeah, that's the most fun question to dive into with Amazon ads, in my opinion. Sponsored products has the most ad inventory and it looks the most like an organic listing. So typically performance is one of the best, but it's also the most widely available ad type. You don't need brand registry for it. It's really easy to run, just keyword targeting, product targeting. So on one hand, 100%, everyone needs to be maxing out their sponsored product presence before diving into all the fun, shiny things. But on the other hand, they can get a little bit more expensive, and that top of page inventory can get really expensive, meaning you're not capitalizing on as much volume with sponsored products if you can't pay to play. That's kind of the first thing I like to set in terms of like expectations with people. Beyond that, I 100% recommend running sponsor brands. I think it's one of the most aesthetic ad types. It does great for slowly moving up the funnel. Conversion rates and click-through rates can be amazing because like you have a video and search ad that's a pay-per-click model, which is super awesome. You have that headline search ad with a custom image, and that really captures eyeballs and takes up the majority of the page. So those are the two that I'm like 100% you must push. When you start getting into the creative targeting and the audiences, I'm still a big fan of them, but if you're not familiar with how to optimize and set them up, things can go downhill really fast.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think there's a lot of mistakes being made when managing budgets? And I'll add to this, how do you feel about using budgets in general, portfolio versus campaign budgets? And the bigger question, I guess, should budgets even be a part of the strategy if you're managing bids appropriately?
If you're managing bids appropriately is like my favorite asterisk in that whole sentence, because at the end of the day, we know Amazon advertising is such an important part of the big picture. Amazon's put a lot more weight into it in most recent years, and they've really started shifting away from like some of the ranking manipulation and all of those fun things and really prioritizing ads. So if you know how to optimize bids, which is the most fundamental skill set you should have as a brand owner, in my opinion, budget probably shouldn't be a concern, because if you're within your tacos and ACoS goals, you just want to continue to scale and invest and push more money. 3 to 4 years ago, I think this could be a lot different. We had brands that were like, hey, I have only like 5% of my spend compared to my top line sales. Let's go for a lower ACoS. That's all that matters. And nowadays, I'm like, that's not realistic if you want long-term success on the platform.
Yeah, those days are long gone, sadly. I joke that back when I used to work for Amazon, there were still 10-cent bids available.
Yes. Like you could really have terrible targeting and still be profitable back in those days.
Yes, so true.
Back when I started, you couldn't even advertise in the category I was selling on private label. It was like body jewelry type products, and advertising wasn't even released yet. It's like, that's how quickly, and that wasn't that long ago. I mean, that's like 6-7 years ago.
It's evolved. And it is just so amazing what's now happening with video and custom creative, virtual product placements, and Amazon Prime Video TV shows. So it is an exciting time to see that Amazon's really becoming like a true media powerhouse and not just this retail marketing solution. I'd also be really curious to get your thoughts in how you're seeing Amazon advertising now fit into larger overarching digital media investments. We're seeing a lot about rising cost of customer acquisition with Facebook and Google. It seems like the future of being more fluid with ad dollars, from pulling ads or ad dollars from Facebook and investing into Amazon and vice versa. Is that something you're currently seeing a lot of, and would be curious to get your perspective on it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think COVID was a really big catalyst for that. I think, especially for all of the retail brands who are also making those in-store investments, COVID happened and everything on the iOS side happened. And it's like, oh, okay, Amazon should be prioritized. Like that's what it took to find priority in one of the largest e-commerce platforms. But when you're starting to look at your budgets, even on the Amazon side, we'll see $40 cost per clicks in the supplement category relatively often. So when you're having to make that decision, it's really weighing the purchase intent, the conversion rate, and the CPA, and the max volume across all of your platforms. And I think that should be the story that's being told. And then when you start combining some of the aspects of like UGC and Amazon pushing lives, and then you have TikTok opportunities, you really have to have a full funnel view. Everyone's trying to solve the attribution piece of the puzzle. And I think it's really exciting and fun. And Amazon's making some investments to fill that gap, even on the retail side. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be one of those things for the next 3 years where you can almost have too much data. And although attribution is fantastic, I mean, I'm sure you have this conversation all the time, like on the search side versus the DSP side. Like, oh, DSP is like too top of funnel. It doesn't work for our brands. But in reality, you're going out and getting those customers. And then you have to have the search piece to tie it together. And it's all about touch points. And no one's going to be able to quantify the subconscious effect on a customer of having ads on every single platform that they're constantly being hit with. And that's going to be the hard part.
On the point of having too much data, what data points do you think are the most important to track? Because there's so much, right? And your goals can force you to track certain goals and maybe neglect other data points. But what's your perspective there?
We could probably spiral on this topic for like a cross platform, but I'm really just going to focus on Amazon search here. And I would say the biggest mistakes I actually see on Amazon search is one, not understanding, like Todd mentioned, the importance of bid management. So bid management is really the number one key indicator for success. And a lot of brands don't necessarily understand, like, hey, you can see your exact cost per click on any one keyword. So when you know that the pieces of the puzzle are just cost per click and conversion rate, those are really important metrics to know when you're looking at the keywords that are most important for you. Beyond that, I think understanding our conversion rate on the ad side is super important because we don't have a lot of control whether or not a customer converts. It's super, super easy to drive, search customers to a listing, but if they don't buy, that's on the listing. So advertisers need to be familiar with what their category averages are versus what they're seeing in search query and brand metrics has now given us that data. If I really want to zoom out though, it'd probably be like cost per acquisition, conversion rates, and CPMs and CPCs, because those are the variables that we can most easily control. And then beyond that, you can start playing around with all kinds of other things.
Yeah, I was going to ask this earlier, and then Laura just kind of asked the same question. But I put out a post on LinkedIn, one of my very few in the last few years, surrounding repurchase rates being available now in the brand search query performance dashboard, which is really good. I think it just rolled out. Yep. And I think there's been a healthy shift, at least amongst thought leaders, from ACoS and ROAS kind of focus to what you were just talking about and like lifetime value metrics. What are your thoughts, I guess, surrounding that? That's a great migration to be focusing on those things rather than just strictly ACoS and ROAS, right?
100%. I think one of the biggest value adds of Amazon, like to me, is the purchase intent. So I always give the example of like, take a product like Liquid IV. If someone goes into Amazon and types in Liquid IV and clicks your ad, they were aware of your brand. Like they had some form of brand awareness, whether it was off platform, on platform, and Amazon doesn't give us that new to brand data on the sponsored product side. But if someone goes to Amazon and types in electrolyte powder, they probably aren't that aware of our brand because they would have typed in the brand name. And I think when brands start shifting to that understanding and starting to target those terms that are probably going to drive a higher LTV, and shifting those budgets to those terms, that can be really valuable. And we see the same on the DSP side. What's going to show you the best metrics is remarketing. But is remarketing going to increase your top line sales, or is it going to increase your ad efficiency? That's, I think, what's awesome about the work that we're doing is we're spending a lot of time educating on what's in the brand's best interest rather than the agency's best interest, because we can all show an amazing ROAS on Amazon with branded terms and remarketing. but we really have to zero in on what's going to drive the highest LTV, the highest repeat purchase rate, and even in-store sales increases. And that kind of reminds me of 50 years ago with print media. It's like, hey, let's just do a lift test and see what happens. Like,
Yeah, exactly. That brand lift doesn't say too much.
yep.
You mentioned DSP a couple of times. Where and when does DSP come into your playbook? Are you looking at spend thresholds and Seller Central first, or do you think you can take a product and start, you said this earlier, start building that demand, maybe using preset audiences?
I like focusing on search first, just because it's bottom of the funnel, it's easy. And if there is already demand for the product in the category, I always recommend brands start there and then working their way up to DSP. Now, I think a lot of this also depends on the education and the awareness that a brand has around advertising on Amazon or e-commerce, because there's that kind of misconception around ROAS goals and what's possible. So that's the two things that I typically focus on, is like bottom of the funnel, maxing that out, making sure they're ready and have the audience traffic that is going to convert for DSP. And second, making sure that they have the education, they know that, hey, DSP is super powerful, but if you really want to use it to its most advantage, it's going out and getting customers rather than waiting on them to come to you.
Yeah, I definitely agree there.
So we're all preparing for Prime Day next week at the time of this recording, and I'd love to get your thoughts, Destiny, on, what are some mistakes that you've seen brands make around those very high promotional, high trafficked, but also usually high CPC periods? Because I can do some experience shares as well. But curious on your thoughts of, one, like how to make the most of that influx of traffic, but where have you also seen brands lose money because maybe they overshot it?
I have one mistake that kind of comes to mind. And again, it's just because we've been in the industry so long. I feel like that in the last few years, there's been a consumer shift. Customers know what Prime Day is and what it's for. It is now somewhat synonymous with Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which means they're going to the platform to find the best deals. And Amazon has also started to kind of shift where they give priority to every single listing that has a badge or a deal or anything going on. I think last year they actually had a carousel at the top of the page that only showed lightning deals within that time period. They're just pushing more and more focus to brands that are giving discounts. 3 to 4 years ago, you could, have your products on Prime Day, not run any deals and still get a decent sales lift because customers were just trying to find deals. They're looking everywhere. But I think last year was one of the first big years we saw that brands who didn't do a single thing, they didn't prioritize any deals, they didn't push ads any further to make sure they're kind of taking advantage of all that traffic, saw 0% sales increase. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes, is just assuming because there's going to be 5 to 6 times the amount of people on the platform, I'll just get sales anyways. I don't need to do anything. That's probably like one of the bigger mistakes I've seen more recently.
Laura stole all my questions. So I had a bunch jotted down around Prime Day as well. So can we just do a quick fire on Prime Day questions? First one is it a mistake to increase bids across the board for an account on Prime Day?
I would say it's dependent on your goals, but yeah, typically I think it could get really dangerous, especially when you have things like Amazon's now giving suggested bids for Prime Day. If you don't know your goals, you're probably just going to spend a lot of money. Historically, we've seen conversion rates increase and ACOS decrease the day of if you're not investing in those top of search placements.
Yeah.
We also see CPCs are stable for, page 2, page 3, page 4 on some of the PDPs. But any brand that tries to focus on winning the number one most important inventory, which is anything top of page or the video and search ad, anyone who tried to compete on those CPCs and that was their only focus, typically broke even or did see an increase in ACOS because it's just so competitive that it becomes pay to play.
Sure. Should budgets be raised?
100%. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit, again, within your goals. We like to go and, hey, filter by your campaigns, look for everything that's within your ACOS targets and increase budgets. And if you're not increasing bids, it's not that likely that conversion rate is going to be worse. So it's just a great way to capture extra traffic within your profitability range.
Should bids be increased on historically strong converting keywords, if we get more specific on that first question?
I am nervous to say yes, because I don't want people to go in across the board and just jack up bids on everything with the strong conversion rate. I say to define your KPIs first. Are you focused on scaling or focused on profitability? And then go into your targeting tab and truly look at what's converting best. And then look at the keyword and say, hey, do I need to improve my rank on this keyword? Is it my most important keyword? Let's increase my bid then, because my goals are going to be beyond a cost related. It's going to be about market share and rank.
Yeah, that's a great caveat. And last question then surrounding Prime Day strategy. Do you think DSP, if it makes sense, obviously to be running DSP, you've been doing it for an account or a client, should retargeting ads be leveraged, views, retargeting ads be leveraged after the event to capitalize on increased PDP views?
Most definitely. I also recommend, if you're not ready for DSP or don't have the agency that can run it for you, run the sponsored display remarketing campaigns. Yeah. I always go like super macro, like you have all of this attention on your listing and they probably have $700 in their cart and they don't want to buy something else, but give them a few weeks of reserving your ad and, see what happens. It's a great way to improve advertising efficiency.
Awesome. Thanks. Anything else you would add in terms of preparing for Prime Day? We have a fall Prime Day coming as well, so this could be relevant if it doesn't come out in time.
I have like a really, really long Notion checklist I wrote this week, and I'm like trying to run through everything on it. I would say product targeting for all ad types typically does incredibly well because customers are window shopping. I think something that Laura mentioned was like, those CPCs at the top of the page get super expensive. So like define your priorities outside of profitability. Like this is your number one most important keyword and you have a deal and you're worried about market share, win top of search. That's super easy, but you can't optimize those campaigns for profitability because cost per clicks are just not as low as they used to be. So you really have to get clear on what your organic goals are and then adjust your advertising strategy to align with that.
What's your thoughts on Amazon Marketing Stream? Have you guys used it internally?
I've been telling our brands or anyone who asks me about it, I'm like, yeah, it's really awesome. It's really cool data to see, but you're going to pay for it because you have to have a development cost associated with the data and having a data analyst come in, and it doesn't make sense if you're only spending $10,000 a month. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you because I think I heard you before talk about dayparting and being a little bit against it for that reason specifically, which makes sense still. And I'm still, a lot of people are just, really hyping it up based on the availability. I think the push notifications for budgets could be useful. Yes. Just knowing that portion of it for sure. But other than that, I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah. And even I dove into a ton of the data, just looking for major discrepancies in CPCs, like, hey, maybe CPCs are $30 in the morning and $4 at night.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a pattern anywhere, which just kind of frustrated me at that point because I was like personally going through, just trying to find I was trying to post a case study for marketing street, and I couldn't find anything. So then I was like, screw this. Like,
well, if we look through it and find something, I'll share it with you.
Yes, because I'm not close to the idea of the adjustments. I just can't find data for it.
Well, thank you so much for joining the show today. It was such a pleasure. I hope to have you on again, probably a year from now after the whole landscape will change. Once again, I always want to give listeners an opportunity to connect with you. I know Todd called out that you produce awesome content on LinkedIn, which is how we originally connected. Is I totally just creeped on you and asked to have a call. So what is the best way for listeners to follow you, get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably just check out my LinkedIn. My name's spelled a little bit unique, so don't make that mistake. And if you're interested in contacting us, just check us out at betterams.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Destiny.